Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Board with Each Other, the board gaming podcast that reviews games through a two-player lens, whether that's playing with your partner, significant other, a really good friend, or that crewmate on the ship that just cannot be relied upon for anything and keeps breaking equipment. I'm Al Simpson, and I'm joined today, as ever, by my lovely co-host and wife, Hannah Kelly.
Hi guys.
And today we are reviewing The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9, I'm not going to use its full title the entire way through because there are two games in the Crew series, as far as I know to this point, is a cooperative trick-taking game where you take on the roles of astronauts in the quest for a ninth planet in our solar system.
Not Uranus.
No, but Uranus is mentioned quite a lot, to the point that I think they actually lent into it a little bit. But anyway, we'll get to that.
Pluto's ninth planet. That's the one that's been axed.
No. Pluto is the ninth planet. I don't actually know. That's embarrassing. No, I'm pretty sure in the narrative of this, Pluto is classed as a planet, so maybe it's the extra one. As a geek, and I don't know how many planets there are on the solar system. I've forgotten. That's really embarrassing.
You're not that kind of geek.
No. Well, I am a little bit, but apparently not for the solar system anymore. So, as I said, you take the role of astronauts, and to achieve your quest, you play through a series of 50 scenarios. And you basically have to take tricks in accordance with the scenario, what the scenario tasks you with doing. For those uninitiated in trick-taking basically means every player puts down a card of a suit, and the highest numbered card of that suit wins the trick. The tricky thing about the Crew is you have to win tricks dependent on task cards that are handed out at the start of the scenario.
And randomly assigned.
So in a very simple term, for example, you'd have 3 task cards in one of the early scenarios. If you're playing 3 players, you get 1 each. And on that task card will be a card and a suit. Basically, you have to win that suit to complete you have to win that trick containing that card to win to complete the task. So that card could be somebody else put it down in the trick, or it could be yourself. It doesn't really matter. As long as you win the trick that card was within, you basically complete that task. The tasks start out very, very simple, where you've just got a number of task cards that you have to complete. But as the scenarios progress, you have much more complicated scenarios laid out before you. So it could be you have a series of task cards that have to be done in a certain order, or you get quite unusual ones where certain people have to win in sort of like an even number of tricks, and you have to go through the whole deck, or the commander is the first player, essentially, that has to win the first or the last trick, for example, and the complexity ramps up as you go through. So each scenario tends to add more conditions or more task cards up until right at the end, where I think you get up to 9 or 10. The Crew is designed to be played by 3 to 5 players. It is not a game that has been designed with 2 players in mind, and we've got quite a lot to say about that. But there is a variant that comes within the box that allows you to play as 2, where you have a dummy third player, the AI, Jarvis. And at the start of the game, Jarvis is dealt 7
cards face down, and then on top of those face down cards, you deal 7 cards face up. Once you've played the face up card, you then turn over the card that was beneath it, so you begin to cycle through his hand.
Yeah. And the player who's the commander, who has there's a series of 4 cards, which are trump cards, rockets. Whoever has the 4 rockets, which can't be Jarvis, this would be one of the other 2 players, takes on the role of the commander. That's the same in 2 and 3 plus games. And the commander, when you're playing as 2, takes the role of Jarvis as well. Mm-hmm. So you decide which cards to play. You cannot communicate during the game about your hand or about cards or about strategy at all. All you're allowed to do is each player has a communication marker,
which was not always available. Some
no.
Scenarios it's not available.
And with that communication marker, you can place at any time, doesn't have to be your turn, you can place down a card, and you can place the marker on the top, which means this is the highest value card of that suit you have, at the bottom, which means it's the lowest, or in the middle, which means it's the only. You can only do that once per game.
If at all.
If at all. If the scenario allows you to. You have some scenarios that don't allow you to do that until sort of the third or fourth trick has been won. You have some where you can communicate, but you can only communicate by placing down a card. The meaning of that card needs to be inferred by the other players, basically. And that is it, in a nutshell, really.
Yep, so I would say that each trick probably takes no more than 5 minutes, even if you probably play it.
Each scenario.
Yeah, sorry.
Featuring multiple tricks. Yeah.
Probably takes maybe 5 to 10 if you're particularly thinking about it.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
I can't imagine one going on for more than 10 minutes, really.
Each scenario is fairly quick, but there are 50 scenarios in the box.
And obviously, it's sort of designed to play through the scenarios in order, but you can also just pick out any scenario from the book and play that
if
as
you're
it is. Yeah, well, we'll get onto that. So yeah, this was a random purchase, another charity shop find, fortuitous charity shop find over the years. It's always something that I've been vaguely curious about, but I've been put off by the discourse around it at 2 players, and obviously we'll get onto that. And I believe, I'm not absolutely certain because I haven't played it, I do believe the sequel to it, Mission Deep Sea, has a better implemented 2-player variant out of the box, but I'm not entirely sure about that. So yeah, trick-taking games.
We have a couple.
Yeah.
I think because of the nature of them, they kind of scratch that lighter itch rather than more complicated, heavy games that we play. And I quite like the idea, again, that it's cooperative, because when I've done trick-taking games previously, they've always been competitive.
Yeah, that is the twist, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I think I've ever played that, it's not the same at all, but is a vaguely similar wheelhouse is an Arby. Not being able to communicate numbered cards, trying to work together to achieve something. But it's not trick-taking, but it's of that vein. So if you've ever played an RB, I think it'd probably scratch a very sort of similar itch, albeit with a little bit more to it than an RB has to it. Mm-hmm. There's nothing else within the cards that change the gameplay at all. Like, you think, compare it to something like Fox in the Forest, where you've got trick-taking, but there's also all of these cards that have massive effects on the game. There's nothing like that within this. It's just straight up trick-taking. Yeah. So yeah, anything else you'd like to say about it in general before we move on to scoring?
So I like to think of the crew as mind poker.
Yes. For those uninitiated, which is probably everybody in the world except for myself and a good friend of ours, mind poker is a game that Hannah and a friend came up with that basically involves playing poker, but you don't have any cards.
Yeah, you just do it all in your mind.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a bit like this, because you have to guess what's in someone else's hand.
This is what I have to deal with, listener.
It's mind poker.
Yes, mind poker, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Don't forget to patent that and start a Kickstarter on it.
Right, should we get on to scoring then?
Yes, yeah, I think this is going to be a fairly quick one today. It's quite a light game, so let's crack on.
So the first in our general category is components, and I kind of have to say it's quite difficult to get particularly excited about what's essentially a deck of cards.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it is a deck of cards. The cards are standard quality.
The artwork on the cards is, well, there isn't any, it's a couple of geometric shapes and different colours.
No, it's not. It's astronauts and stuff, people doing stuff on the cards. Are you not? I mean, it's very unremarkable.
Right,
but
I'm going to open the box.
Oh, we've got a live second unboxing here. Despite playing this about 80 times, Hannah apparently doesn't.
Oh God, yeah, you're right. Oh man, I've never noticed. Oh Jesus.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the task cards are just numbers, but the actual cards have some artwork on. But I have to say, it is very unremarkable. It is different coloured astronauts doing random things in space.
At least you noticed.
It is nothing to write home about, and after about 80 games, Hannah hasn't even noticed it existed. So I mean, that's a little bit damning there, really.
However, I mean, it doesn't need to be any more.
No,
than that, really.
It doesn't need to be. It's functional through and through. I have noticed that some of the cards that we have started to fray a little bit, but we have played it about 80 times.
Yes, and also I do funny shuffling. I do the fancy shuffling.
Riffle shuffle, yeah.
Riffle shuffle.
Yeah.
So they're not going to hold up as well.
Might be a good idea just to leave these ones, is what I'm saying, if you want this in for the long term. The only little bit I like is the little astronaut standee, which denotes the commander. I think for such a small box game, just having something like that is a nice little touch. Yeah.
The counters that you use in order to determine sort of which tricks need to be completed first, I like standard cardboard little counters. I mean, again,
adequate, functional.
Difficult to get excited about, but again, if you were going to start doing wooden chips and stuff, it's going to push your price point up to the point that it's probably not financially viable.
No, well, I mean, it will be. It's a very cheap game, but do you want to pay that for that kind of thing, you know? We often talk about set up a tear down in this part.
The thing is, right, it's not difficult to set up. It's very, very quick. There's a lot of shuffling that's involved. But when you've done it for the 100th time on the same scenario, it begins to get a little bit...
Yeah, a bit tired. But I mean, that's just the nature of the game. I think, unfortunately, the setup of the AI Jarvis adds a little bit to that. And
shuffling out.
You can't just shuffle the deck and deal. If you're playing 3+, you can just shuffle the deck and deal it out, shuffle the task deck, deal it out. But when you're dealing with Jarvis, you have to take the 4 rockets out, then you've got to lay all the cards, shuffle, lay all the cards out for Jarvis, put the 4 rockets back in, shuffle the deck again, and then deal them out.
But realistically, I mean, it doesn't add 2 minutes.
It's not Gloomhaven, though.
No, it's not Gloomhaven, so I don't think there's really anything to complain about.
No.
Down just takes 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's not a complaint. It's just, letting people know what they're in for. In terms of sort of table space, it doesn't take up a huge amount of room, but it's not something you could play on sort of an airplane tray table. You do need a little bit of space to do it.
You do need a table for it.
Yeah. Which I think is always worth mentioning with these kind of small games, because there are some, like Fox in the Forest, that you could literally just play on an airplane tray table.
Yeah.
But this one, no, you will need a table, so a reasonable space to play it on. Okay. Anything else you want to mention about the components?
Not really. I mean, I scored it a 6 because I think it's perfectly perfunctory, but how excited can you get about it?
Ditto. Yeah, I think a 6 is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I think a little bit more on the artwork side would have gone quite a long way.
I might have noticed it then.
Yeah, you might have actually noticed it. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It serves its function. It does what it needs to do. So I think 6 is fair.
Cool. And then on to complexity. So as always, this isn't necessarily about how complex the game is, but it's how much the complexity serves the gameplay, as you like to say.
Yeah.
This also includes things like analysis paralysis, arguing about rules, etc.
Yeah, well, no arguing during the game allowed.
Well, in true form, we fucked up like the first 10 rounds because we didn't understand how rockets worked. But that's because we're stupid, not because of the rule book.
Speak for yourself. It was just a different interpretation. It wasn't stupidity. Interpretation of the rules. Yeah, I mean, it is not a complex game. It is a lightweight game. The complexity comes from the puzzle therein. The complexity comes from the scenarios themselves.
I think there was one scenario we had to look up, but I think that's because we just weren't sure rather than the rules not being particularly clear.
There've been a few where I've taken to Google, I have to say. I think the rule book is good, but it is not the best I've ever read.
I think what's really cool about the rulebook is each of the scenarios come with some flavour text, like a paragraph about, how your machinery is fucked up and what's happening thematically. But the actual instructions for the scenario itself are all pictorial.
Icons, basically. Yeah. And I spent a lot of time looking up icons where I just thought maybe just a couple another sentence might have been quicker and easier. I know it looks prettier, but after, you read the rules and then that's it. But the rule book itself, you've got one book that's divided into scenarios, the logbook, and the other that's the rules. And there were a couple of sort of edge cases, I'd call them, where I did have to take to Google because I wasn't quite sure how they worked. It wasn't particularly clear. Maybe that was just me being thick, but I've read much simpler rules for more complex games, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The
rules were also quite long-winded for considering how basic it is, which makes me think a bit of editing and a bit of better writing of them would go a long way. In terms of the game itself, I mean, the complexity does serve the game. I don't think it's missing anything. It does. It fills that niche. You can crack it out and have a couple of games of this as a amuse-bouche before even an hors d'oeuvre. I think it's a great game to get the juices flowing.
Yeah.
In that sense, so the complexity is quite right for it, I think.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think the rules themselves are simple. The devil in the detail is obviously in the scenarios, and I think it's accessible to most people.
Yeah, I think you'd have a hard time finding somebody who couldn't get their head around this. Like even like the most casual of gamers, I think could get their heads around this.
Yeah.
It might take a little while. Granny might need 3 or 5 rounds, but Granny's also probably played Bridge, is probably better at it than you. So I think it's fine. I think it's nothing like, wow, this does something unbelievable with a genre that I've never seen before.
Well, that's not what this is.
No, that's not what this is, but I don't think there's any enormous sort of crazy ingenuity in the rules or anything like that. So I've given it a 7.
So I gave it an 8
above
because
average.
I think it's pretty much bang on what it needs to be, really.
Fair enough.
And I think, it's good.
On to shelf life and value for money.
So this retails for around £12-ish.
Yeah, the £12 mark.
So what I would say is there is for a little box, there is a huge amount of content. 50 scenarios is quite a lot of scenarios, and bearing in mind as you get towards later games, that you're not going to complete it in one go. You're going to have several cracks at it.
No.
And we've had this for a while, and we've sort of steadily plugged away.
Yeah, I'd say about 6 to 8 months we've had this.
Yeah, and I mean, we go through peaks and troughs, but I think we've steadily plugged away at it. It's kept us occupied for that time period. So I think, in terms of value for money, it's absolutely cracking. Yeah,
it is. It is really good for value for money. I think your mileage may vary depending on how enjoyable you find the core concept, but there's also an aspect here where play groups have probably got a lot to do with this. And we will. I don't want to sort of step on the toes of the next section, but perhaps not the best game at 2. Can you find 3 or more people to play with regularly, which will probably give it a lot. I can imagine this being a regular part of a board gaming group's life to get the juices flowing, as I said, for a very long time.
Yeah.
And for the £12 price of entry, that's absolutely insane value.
Yeah.
Like, really, really good. But your mileage may vary with 2 players.
It's also essentially a series of scenarios. So, I mean, the other way you could play it is you could probably make a committed effort and get through it in maybe 3 or 4 play sessions, depending on how many players you've got and stuff like that. But then I think it would be very much more a one and done kind of thing. I can't imagine completing it and then wanting to go back to it for a very long time. In my head, it's definitely one and done kind of.
Yeah, and I imagine a lot of people will feel like that. But again, if you also approach it by just finding scenarios that you really enjoyed, you could probably just play those over and over again.
So you're playing with seasoned board gamers, then you just start at scenario 30.
Yeah, for example, which is where it starts to get quite
juicy.
Yeah, it's a good word for it. But as I mentioned a couple of times, we played this over 80 times. I can't think about how many hours we've spent on it, but for £12, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
It is the biggest example of a lot of game in a tiny box I think I've ever seen. Like, there's a lot there. And the scenarios do keep it fresh and interesting. Things do change up all the time. It's not just playing the same game over and over and over again. I don't think the depth is necessarily there to allow for the same game over and over again. Like, I've seen smaller boxes that you would just play the same thing over and over again. I mean, think about things like Love Letter and Fox of the Forest. Like, there's a beauty to them that doesn't really exist here, in my personal opinion. But the variance of the scenarios does keep it relatively fresh. We haven't finished it. We stopped at scenario 40. We'll have stopped at scenario 40. I'll explain why in the 2-player section a bit more. But yeah, I mean, I have zero regrets purchasing it. We've had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I give it an 8.
Yeah, so I gave it a 7.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's in terms of its shelf life and replayability. Value for money, I think it's exceptional.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, our final category under the general scoring is fun. And here I have to ask for a question. When we're talking about fun, are we talking about fun as a 2-player, or are we talking about fun as like a group?
Yeah, it's a tough one, this.
Answer.
And I can see it quite clearly. I don't need to play this with loads of people to see it. It is a fun game.
Yeah.
But, again, treading on the toes of the next section, it is a less fun game at 2 players. But that's not what we're reviewing in this part. So yeah. I'm going to try and put my objectivity hat on.
Just pretend we have friends, basically.
yeah. We don't have any friends. It's just you and us, listener. That's it. Or family, just all left. Because my board game addiction. Anyway, I digress. It's a fun game. Is this a game that I want to, let off silly string and fireworks whenever something, you suggest bringing it out? No. It doesn't capture my imagination like a lot of other games do, but it is a fun puzzle to try and work through. And I think the more people you added to that puzzle equation, the more fun it would be. It is a good laugh. It's easy, it's breezy, but also thinky. So, yeah, it's a fun game. It's nothing that I'd go crazy about. How about you?
Yeah, so I definitely think it'd be fun. The more players you have, I think the more fun it would be. And yeah, it's definitely a puzzle. So it's not necessarily. Often when we talk about this, we talk about that role-playing element, perhaps, or the things that come. It's not like that, but it is definitely fun. And I've really enjoyed, I think, some of our more challenging games that we really had to sit there and think, and we've sort of been looking and we've been calculating induction. Yeah, it is fun.
Yeah, and it's satisfying.
Yeah.
When you win, it is very satisfying when you win. And that's often a question I ask in this section, like, is it good, is it fun to win?
And it must be, because we've kept going.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we weren't having any fun, we would just sack it off at like scenario 20.
So, yeah. I scored it a 7 on the basis that if we're talking about general fun rating.
I gave it a 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, quite close in our general appraisal of the game this time, I think. Yeah. Which is interesting, because we usually differ on certain things, and we're quite close on this one.
Very recently.
Only recently.
All right, let's total up those scores.
So that gives us a overall rating of 6.8. As always, we round, so that rounds to a 7.
Fair and reasonable, I think.
I think so, yeah.
It's a solid game.
It's a good game. I'm happy with that, and I think our opinions on the two-player side of things, I don't think have coloured that too much. So, yeah, it's a good game.
Okay, so on to our two-player categories then.
There we go.
And the first one is table talk / getting to know you.
So, I don't know how the hell you are supposed to review a game about table talk where you're not allowed to talk. I find this, full disclosure, I found this category exceptionally difficult to score.
So, here's the thing, right? You're not allowed to talk, you're only allowed to communicate one thing, maybe, and that's by putting a token down. But the other thing that I found, so I get that as a concept, and that's cool, and that's kind of quirky, I guess. The thing that I found difficult was, like, because you can't talk about strategy, you can't even necessarily talk, like, once the game's over.
No.
I feel like it's a bit cheaty to do that.
Yeah, it's almost a bit like metagamey, isn't it?
Yeah, like, I did this because I thought that X, Y,
and
Z.
next time, let's not do it. Yeah. Which you probably can within the rules, but it feels wrong.
It does, it feels a bit wrong.
I feel like our sessions, we bring this out, we don't talk for half an hour, we just sit there slapping down cards and mumbling occasionally. We move on.
And how much then? I think it's because of that. I was thinking, well, maybe the whole getting to know you, like thinking about how you were. Like sometimes you would play things over and over again. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you hammering this point home?
Wild card.
Clearly, it's because in your head you're trying to achieve something.
Yeah, I have a strategy,
but
and
I still don't understand what that is. And afterwards, I can't even ask you because I feel like it's cheating.
It's metagaming, yeah.
So it's not only there is no table talk. It's also kind of a confusing game at times.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, it's a really tough one in terms of getting to know you. It's difficult unless you do properly talk through it. But I guess again, if you're in that realm of a relationship or friendship where you were genuinely interested as to how people tick and work through these things, perhaps you do sit down and talk through it, and perhaps it's a really good conversation starter.
And also, maybe you're quite early on in your relationship.
That's what I mean.
You know, where you don't want the pressure of having to make quips and stuff all the time. Like, that could be... It could feel a really interesting or,
unique space.
Unique space in a relationship's kind of... Also, sometimes I'm just bored of listening to you, and it's just...
I mean, I am, to be fair, so, I have to edit these.
It feels quite nice.
You almost said the thing. You're bored with?
Yeah, no.
Oh, no. Okay, all right, I tried. But yeah, I mean, I felt really odd about scoring this in either direction, so I took the coward's way out and gave it a 5.
Yeah, no, I put it as a 2 because we are scoring it on the basis of table talk. We think that that's really important as a top part of a two-player game in our niche, so there isn't any, and like I say, it's that post-game discussion space that
doesn't really exist
that I also am a bit unsatisfied with, but I understand why. However, Other people may have different wants from games, in which case it might tick all those boxes.
And that's a rule you've imposed on yourself, to be fair. There's nothing in the rules that stops you discussing things at length in between games, so, you know.
Yeah, I do still think that's kind of cheaty.
Yeah, it does feel a bit wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
So I
fine.
split it too, yeah.
Well done for being the brave out of the two of us.
So our next category is competitiveness / co-op rating.
Cooperability, yeah.
Okay, you go.
I mean, this kind of overlaps a lot, I think, with the previous category, where I think about what it is that I enjoy from a co-op experience. What I enjoy from a co-op experience is that joint strategizing and seeing things that you strategize to together pay off. You can't strategize in this. And I appreciate that's very much a me thing. Other people may just enjoy that sort, almost like there's no quarterbacking. There's no having
absolutely no quarterbacking. Can't be.
There's no ability of your playing partners to, or partner in this case, to affect your play, because you are completely out on your own. You have to do what you're going to do. But again, for people that enjoy co-op games, that might find that they lean on somebody else to make it enjoyable. They might find this quite stressful. Mm-hmm. And if you have people at very differing skill levels with it, you might end up in a situation where one person's getting quite annoyed at the other, and the other person feels a little bit...
No, I don't think you necessarily would even necessarily see that, to be honest. Because you don't know what's in someone else's hand. Yeah,
no,
okay,
you don't.
I've made stupid plays before.
Oh, we both have, yeah.
You also don't necessarily know that someone's making a stupid play, because actually... It might not be.
No.
Depending on what's in that person's hands.
Yeah.
So you kind of just have to let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go.
No, don't.
No, okay,
Don't. Yeah, it's a tough one. I think I have to... By its nature, those could be positive or negative points for you, but I have to review this as me and my personal opinion.
Right, so now you're going to stand and hold true to your morals, ethics and rating, not with table talk.
Yeah, now I am, because I feel more comfortable with this one. But yeah, it doesn't quite fit the bill for a co-op experience that I look for. I think that's the ultimate conclusion for me for this.
Yeah, so I would agree with that, in the sense that it's cooperative, in the sense that you're not competing with each other. But it doesn't really feel necessarily like a cooperative game. No,
it feels like you're playing in your own little zone, both hoping to achieve your goals, i.e. completing the scenario.
I mean, I did sit on the fence on this one. I scored it a 5 because I didn't really know how to score it.
Yeah, fair enough. I went for a 3 for this one. It has its good points, but in terms of what I look for in a co-op experience these days, it's not really it. It doesn't hit it for me. Last but definitely not least, scalability. So this, in essence, is how, if you're playing it as two, do you miss having other players? Does it work as a two-player game? Short answer?
No.
No. I mean, it does to a point. I think what we've discovered is, and what I think I've inferred, is in the earlier stages of the scenarios, so probably up till about the midpoint, I think having Jarvis and having the visibility of those cards, because you have so few tasks to win, actually makes the game easier. Perhaps even trivial to a point.
Yes.
But you reach a point where those hidden cards that are trapped underneath cards can make a disturbing number of scenarios impossible. Mm-hmm. To the point that you just have to keep going again and again and again until you get the right card draw, which feels quite rote and annoying. And when you get to up towards where we got to, scenario 40, the last few scenarios are nigh on impossible. You have to get very, very lucky. And for a game that is so strategic, it feels very antithetical to rely on that luck.
But we've kind of also said that it's not strategic because you can't communicate with other people. I also think there's an element we didn't use communication enough. I don't think that was our issue. But you're absolutely right. There were scenarios that we started, and after we drew our tasks, one of us turned around and was like, this is unplayable.
We just had to fold immediately.
We just had to immediately fold because there's no way we can win this.
Which is a design issue. But it's not a design issue that I'm going to hold against the designers, because this is not
a two-player game.
And again, we go back to what this podcast is about. This is about, because there are instances where the general overarching discourse is, this is no good at two players, and I think about something like Terra Mystica, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So I tend to approach games that have a lot of discourse around them like, this is not suitable for two, with a bit of an open mind, because I found that it's not always the case. This, however, fully agree with the discourse.
I think we stopped playing because I think we felt it was broken, essentially. It's broken for two players. Like, there's no way that we could make it work. You potentially could. You could keep slogging away, but you just tallied up the last number. We played 15 games of the last...
Of Scenario 40, yeah.
Scenario 40.
Without
at this point, we're out. It doesn't become fun anymore. It just sucks the joy out of it.
You kind of just sit sorry, go on.
However, there are some people that might actually get a real kick out of playing it 30 times and going, finally, we got there.
Yeah.
That's not us.
But I feel like with the AI component, it's more about getting the right the right draw of cards in the AI space, combined with the right tasks, and it feels less like you're winning. It feels like you've just finally got a lucky draw, and therefore you can move on. And that's not why I play board games. I want that agency to be able to go, yeah, we did this. Whereas if you play it sort of like 15 times, then all of a sudden you win because you got a really lucky draw. It feels really hollow.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, we finally got the cards to fall the right way, and therefore we move on. And that's why I think I got that Scenario 40. I was just like, I'm done now because I'm not getting any joy out of this. It doesn't work as two.
No.
It does not work as two. You can get some fun, but you will if you have this on the shelf, there's so many other things you can bring out.
But that said, I really enjoyed it and had a really good time up until probably we hit around 35, Scenario 30.
Yeah, fair enough.
And again, if you think about the price point, I know that the different category and all that, but if you think about the price point, 12 quid for the amount of fun we've had out of it, just accepting and knowing that we're probably never going to get to the end, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I mean, we got a lot of mileage out of it.
The other question, though, is, again, thinking about our lives and our, our gaming, we're not necessarily going to have that core group of people that will work through the whole box with us.
No, but I mean, there's a lot of scenarios there. Yeah. Again, you'd need a Gloomhaven level crew to continuously work through them.
That would be a bit extreme.
No, but still, but this is not a game that you'll sit down and play for 3 hours over and over again. No. I think it's quite unlikely. So in that essence, you probably need a dedicated group of people to do it over a crew, if you will, to do it over a long period of time, and that's quite hard to find. I think this probably has more mileage in picking random scenarios out and going, let's play a few of these, and for that, this is great. I mean, as a 3 to 5 player game, I imagine it's a great deal of fun.
Yeah.
But in terms of FOMO and scalability, I'm going to give it my first 1.
Oh, so I would be inclined to give it a 0. Can we score 0?
No, we don't score 9.
No. Okay, 1 then.
1. Yeah, so I've never given it a 1 before, but I'm going to have to give 1 here.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it is broken at 2.
Yeah, it is broken at 2. I think they gave it a try with the AI component, but it's not quite far enough, and I feel like it needs something extra to make it a bit more workable, and it's not there. And I don't think the scenarios were designed with 2 in mind, as the latter third, shall we say, is made absolutely apparent. Okay.
All right, so let's add it up.
So yeah, that gives us a average total of 2.8, which we round to 3, which is definitely our lowest scoring game so far in any of either the 2 categories that we work with. I'm not going to sit here and say that's a disservice. I just don't think it's a good 2-player game at all. It's a bad 2-player game. It's a good game, but it's a bad 2-player game.
Yep.
So yeah, that wraps it up for this episode. Until next time, be good to each other and play lots of board games.